Welcome into the CounterPunch podcast here with Cracked Rackets. I'm your host, Richard Mai, alongside my co-host, Archit Surash, which has been so long since we've sat down together. The Wimbledon draws, just like us from college, are out, and now we have so much to talk about. We're splitting this up into two pods because there is so much to talk about, and we've learned that we just like to talk, don't we, Archit? How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. It's been a while since I've seen your smiley face, heard your amazing voice right now. It's wild because I've finished my sabbatical after being in Stillwater, Oklahoma. You went maybe just a little bit farther. I don't know if Poland counts as a little
I don't know if we
farther
got
since it's
Bitter
outside
Jury
the time.
listeners, but I did a 5 a.m. recording for Bitter Jury.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm just thankful we're not battling time differences today, even if we're battling time differences to watch Wimbledon. But you know what? That's a very worthy sacrifice. I'm just excited to talk the draw with you.
Let's get going with our men's draws. I mean, first initial thoughts, maybe some big picture. Are there any matchups that kind of jump out to you?
Well, interestingly enough, I don't even know if there's a specific matchup within the first round. Obviously, there's a fun one with I think Eubanks and Quinton Alice that I'm kind of looking forward to. I think that could be a fun one. Karen Khachanov playing Aslan Karatsev first round. Like that section of the draw is very interesting to me. And then, of course, there is that other section where, let me see, I'm pulling up the draw as we speak right now. So of course, I missed the lead up. Sebastian Korda versus Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. That's me central. Those backhand to backhand exchanges. I live for those.
There's some more fun ones, I think, in that first half that I'm looking at with Berrettini versus Fucsovics, as well as Grigor Dimitrov, who's had a great season thus far against Dusan Lajovic. Always could be a wild card. And then you have the all Frenchman matchup with Gael Monfils and Adrian Manarino, which, again, bound to be fun given the two guys that you're looking at, given that tempers don't flare too high. But something that I also want to keep my eye on is this Alexander Vukic Sebastian Offner match, the winner that would face the winner of Carlos Alcaraz's match with his qualifier, Leal. I think Offner's had a great past few weeks, had a great, grass season. The grass warm-up tournaments don't always translate to Wimbledon success, but it's always interesting to see who can make a smooth transition from the clay into the grass.
Yeah, especially Vukic as well. I think he made semis in Eastbourne this week. Solid run for him. He started to, really pick up his form after kind of dwindling after a very strong summer last year. It'll be interesting to see what he can do on the grass now that he's finally found his footing, very comfortable on that surface. And just with the winner of that to test Alcaraz, of course, some of the other early matches. I know one of the biggest ones that I saw, of course, was where Matteo Berrettini. That was one of the biggest questions I had going into this draw was where Matteo Berrettini was going to land in this draw. And would you look at that? He lands with his fellow countryman, his fellow Italian, Jannik Sinner, the number one seed for the second time now. The second time he's entered a tournament as the world number one. Matteo Berrettini, potential second round opponent for Jannik Sinner. Of course, he does face Fucsovics. Tough first round for Berrettini, but if he is able to get through that, and of course, assuming Sinner gets through Hanfman, that could be a really interesting popcorn match. I see that going 5. You never know with Berrettini. Like his level of play is never really the question, especially on grass. And it's kind of just how well is he able to hold up over best of 5, and how healthy is he really?
Now let's slowly go through and do some breakdown, especially with our seeds. I think since we're already talking about him, let's just start right off the bat. Jannik
See,
Sinner.
look at that. We haven't missed a beat. I've already led you into a fabulous transition. Go ahead.
Maybe the English language hasn't caught up with us yet, but we're there. All right. Jannik Sinner, newly minted world number one, which I think is so awesome to have, Yannick and then Carlos. And if you want to mention the women's for a second, even Iga, then Coco, to have what a lot of people talked about the first time that you have a world number one and two on both the men's and women's single side, all born after the year 2000, I think is promising for the future of the sport. And Sinner's had a great season thus far. I'm excited to see what he can do on the grass. He has a game that I think we've noticed in past years has a pretty smooth transition from that clay to the grass, a real harsh transition, as we talked about before. But I'm excited to see what he does on the grass. Former semifinalist. We all remember that great match against Carlos Alcaraz. I'm excited to see what he can do with it.
Absolutely. Especially the Djokovic loss for some people really left a bad taste in their mouths, but that was a semifinal run for Jannik Sinner, right? And he's really consolidated his position almost since then. Well, I guess if you're counting post puke Sinner in the in the indoor hardcourt swing, excuse me. But ever since then, he's kind of transformed into a completely different player. And to me, he has really cleaned up on these faster surfaces where his aggression is really rewarded. Now, his serve plus one is kind of different than the average one. He's a comfortable volleyer. He's an adept volleyer, but he's not maybe someone who you would expect like Alcaraz, who's going to really emphasize net rushing when you come in. But just his ability to strike the ball from both sides, he can hit it from all contact points, whether it's low or high. He's able to really adjust. He moves so well in and out of the corners, slide, like one of the few players outside of Novak Djokovic who can slide on a grass court. It'll be interesting to see how Sinner kind of navigates the movement early on and just, really settles into the tournament. I'm expecting a deep run from him, although the Berrettini match, if it were to happen, is a really interesting one that could go both ways just because Berrettini has the kind of game that can take the racket out of his opponent's hands. But so does Sinner. So it'll be a really interesting dynamic there. I would expect him to get through his quarter, but it is still a pretty tough side of the draw just with him, Medvedev, and Alcaraz all on one half. Of course, Novak Djokovic fans have to be very happy with that one. But
No, Novak fans rejoice. I mean, this is something that we'll talk about, expand on more later on. But to me, there are two main threats in terms of seeds on his, or three main threats, excuse me, on his side of the draw that I'm scared about if you're a Novak Djokovic fan. But to me, Sinner has a tougher side of the draw. You have your defending champion, and then the next guy that I was going to talk about, Daniel Medvedev. And, I think, I don't know, he's such an enigma to me because sometimes he'll come out and have great play performances, but I feel like when I look at his game, it's very well suited for a hard court, grass court style. Um, and I don't know, I sometimes question why we haven't seen him do as well as Wimbledon as like you would expect. I feel like if I look sheerly at his game, I would expect a bit more finals, a bit deeper runs than he's had in the past. Not to say he's had bad runs, but he doesn't have a bad draw. He does not have a bad draw whatsoever. First main like threat or somebody he should be worried about, in my opinion, comes with Grigor in that third, fourth round.
well, that may be true. I mean, I don't really want to discount Zhang Zhizhen. He did beat Medvedev
Yes.
in 2 weeks ago, but those are just the kind of performances you kind of expect, especially on grass where things are so serve dominant. And, Medvedev can get hit off the court, especially with that deep return position. But it's interesting. Before we get into his portion of the draw, I do want to talk a little bit about Medvedev's success on grass. And, I feel like you might be fairly discounting him a little bit. Semifinals last year, obviously Alcaraz cleaned his clock in that match. It wasn't particularly close, but I feel like that's maybe a matchup specific thing. Like as well as Medvedev's just not as comfortable as a mover. Alcaraz just has far more variety and he can really impose himself, and his Alcaraz's aggression is probably rewarded most on this surface. And in the Medvedev matchup, when Alcaraz is being aggressive and he's not missing, then he's clearly a favorite in that specific matchup. So that's not really an issue for me. I think, obviously Medvedev has said so himself. He's a hard court specialist, right? He is much better on hard court than any other surface, but I'm pretty optimistic on his abilities on a grass court. Like when you look at the strengths, it's kind of a little bit like a stretched out Andy Murray where the backhand really stays low. He's really able to dig himself out, defend well. He kind of outmaneuvers his opponents on that surface, gets a little bit more reward and a little bit more purchase from the serve on this surface compared to others. But I will say Medvedev's serve has really dwindled recently. He's talked about having shoulder issues. Of course, there was the hernia thing a year or two ago. And, it's interesting that if Medvedev is serving well and can counteract and negate the opponent's ability to kind of stretch him out wide on return, then he's a real threat I mean, I would say he's, maybe fourth or fifth on my list of contenders or favorites for the title. Certainly behind that top three. I'm referring to Sinner, Alcaraz, Djokovic, but to me, that's anyone's game after that. And I would not be surprised in best of five if Medvedev is able to make a run, especially because I don't really think he's going to be tested early in his draw. Of course, Jan-Lennard Struff could be a really interesting name there. He historically has been really good on grass and clay, but for some reason just can't put it together at Wimbledon. Like he's had pretty bad results at Wimbledon. I'm pretty sure he has a losing record there, but I kind of discount that. I think at some point it's bound to happen for him. So that's an interesting name to look at there. But yeah, I just think most of all, Medvedev, yeah, of course, aggression is rewarded more on this surface, but I think Medvedev can still outmaneuver opponents. His return stays low with how flat he hits the ball. I think he can really trouble players, and just his ability to redirect off the ground, like it should be enough to get him through. I think he's going to beat whoever is worse than him in a best of five setting. But if there is an opponent, even like a Grigor, who can kind of take advantage of that reel back return position, I think that could be an interesting scenario there.
I think a huge difficulty, and and something that I know, like we always talk about when we do these Grand Slam kind of previews, is the importance of experience in 5 set matches and how long can you last, because now you're playing a whole different game where you actually have to worry about your consistency and can you continue to play at this high level across 5 sets. You're talking multiple hours here. And so I think the difficulty now for a player like Medvedev is now you have two more guys in your way in Sinner and Alcaraz that have now garnered that experience. We started this pod over a year ago where these guys didn't have as much experience playing full 5 set matches. Listen, after last year's Wimbledon final, you cannot tell anybody that Carlos Alcaraz does not have 5 set experience. Like it's a very tough situation for a Medvedev where in past years where these guys were still a bit fresher, you had that as an advantage. But now it's a lot more level playing field when it comes to those endurance matches.
Yeah, absolutely. And even a guy like Sinner, who he's been so consistent this year. I'm I'm going to steal this stat from Gil Gross. He's reached the semifinals he hasn't lost, I think, before the semifinals of every event he's played this year, which to me is the epitome of consistency, right? He's been probably the most consistent player on tour this year in best of five. He's shown it, right? Wins Australia, reaches the semifinals in Roland Garros. And even with those health concerns with the hip, he may not still be 100%. But if that's the Sinner we're getting, that's the Alcaraz it's Alcaraz in best of five. Like I trust him, right? And just maybe that trust level has kind of dwindled for Medvedev a little bit. Like there is a way where I think maybe he's not as good in best of five as I maybe used to. But then I look at it and it's like, well, on his preferred surfaces, he's done fine, right? Finals of the US Open last year, finals of the Australian Open this year. He's gone deep, semifinals of Wimbledon last year. There's no reason to not expect a deep run from him at this tournament.
I think a lot of what I want to also shout out and make sure we make mention of is the work of the master that is Darren Cahill and the amount that he's done with Sinner. And I think this is a huge part of the consistency factor. You look at the players that Darren Cahill has worked with extensively, and you see like they often do have these stints of consistency where they make these quarterfinals or later runs in multiple tournaments in a row. I'm talking Andy Murray, Simona Halep, Ivanovic at the beginning of his career, Andre Agassi, not Agassi's career, Darren Cahill's coaching career. But I think this is a huge thing that we've noticed is that if you hire Darren Cahill, I think he's partially a tuner. He will tune your game to, sharpen it up. But I think a huge thing is he's going to make you consistent as heck. And you are going to have these stints. And this is a guy where you bring him in where you already have some sort of a base and you're looking, how can I extend my longevity of this stint? Can I push the bar to, keep this momentum going,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no points there for me to add. Although I will say, I'm pretty sure you meant Andy Roddick, not Andy Murray, for a Darren Cahill coached player. But
No, Andy Murray.
was Murray a Cahill
I
product?
I had him down on this list that I'm looking at.
Well, fair enough. I'm pretty sure he's coached Roddick, but that could be the other name. Moving on.
I think you're
Semantics.
thinking of Brad Gilbert. You might be
Yeah.
thinking BG.
Well, no. Brad Gilbert has coached Andy Murray too, which is
It's the Andes. It's the Andes, and their timelines overlap. We're moving on. Are there any other players that you want to take a bit of a deeper dive in before we head to our defending champ?
Well, I mean, we should probably mention Grigor. I know you mentioned there in passing, but I think the slam window might be closing for Grigor Dimitrov, and it might be here, right? Where it's like this year, I think, has been his most consistent season by far in his career. I think he's played his best tennis. He's almost rejuvenated his entire career into his 30s now. And, it feels like there's a sense of maturity that there wasn't before, right? And there's a bit more conviction on the serve and the forehand, and he's really been able to rely upon it. Now, he's playing such great tennis throughout the year. I wish he had a bit of a run in Australia. Of course, that Nuno Borges loss kind of took a little bit of air out of everything, but throughout the entire year, he's been very consistent. He's brought a high level, obviously goes into the second week at the French Open, very successful player. Just he's won it all, never really gotten the slam consistency deep into the second week that he has. Of course, he's made the semifinals here at Wimbledon before. I think it was 2014, but it's been a while, clearly. So, I'd be interested. I actually think this is a real shot for Dimitrov. His slice, his ability to keep the ball low can just be so difficult for any opponent. Now, conversely, his backhand return can get exploited on faster surfaces, but I think he just has enough. His ability to block returns, his hand skills, his aggression, the touch, the physicality, everything that he has. I wouldn't be shocked to see him make a really deep run here. And there's nothing really that's maybe stopping me from predicting it, as you'll probably see later in our draw preview.
At the same time, the hard thing I think for Grigor is the draw that he's been given, right? And this is something that we talk about a lot, is a huge part of how deep we can see we can see a player going into a Grand Slam is what is the draw that you've been handed, right? And of all of the 4 seeds, the quarter that he got is the one I would not want to be in, is Jannik Sinner. That of the 4, to me, is the one I don't want, because Sinner, to me, is at the moment the most consistent, the most clean. I don't like it. I would not like it if I was looking. If I wanted one of the 4 seeds, this is going to be a bit obvious, but I am picking Alexander Zverev every single day of the week. As would anybody. He's the only one that has not won a slam. But at the same time, this is really tough. It's tough because it is a much more even playing field. You have 3 guys that are all fighting for this title and are all, the main contenders, the favorites, whatever you want to call it. And there is no conceivable way that they go out unless they take each other out, to me at least. And that is such a tough world to be in if you are not one of those 3 guys. And unfortunately, there's a few set of guys that have that ability to take them out. And with credit to Grigor, if he can keep playing the way he has this season, because he had a really good season so far, he could, at the very least, do some damage to Sinner, given that he makes it that far.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those guys. I mean, that kind of crew, that tier 2, right? Obviously, we know that Sinner, Alcaraz, Djokovic are kind of in a tier on their own. Now, you could argue that there's a separation between Sinner and Alcaraz and Djokovic, just given the results from what we've seen this year. But I'm going off of the 5-year run that we've seen from Djokovic at Wimbledon, assuming he's healthy, which we'll get to later. But I'm assuming that's tier 1. Then you've got your tier 2 guys in Medvedev. Maybe a Hubie Hurkacz makes that run. It could be, I guess.
I was going to get to him.
We'll get there. Yeah. We'll get there. You spent the summer in Poland. We're going to be talking.
You knew I was going to get to him. You know I was going to get to him.
Absolutely. And, I'm thinking about maybe some of the other contenders for that tier 2 section. Obviously, you kind of have to throw Zverev in there, just the slam success and the overall success from the year. But even like a guy like Berrettini could make a run. Tommy Paul, Taylor Fritz, those are kind of the only Americans that I see, doing some real damage here. And then you've got guys like Rublev and Tsitsipas. And so there are still guys, right? You have your Jack Drapers and Sebi Kordas of the world who can, conceivably make a deep
damage.
run here. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, ultimately, I do think you're right. It is one of the 3 favorites tournament to lose. And speaking of those favorites, why don't we go ahead and move on to Carlos Alcaraz's quarter?
I was gonna say, talk about someone you don't want to be seeing across the net from you for a while. It's Carlos Alcaraz.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, if I'm the draw gods, like, I don't know what Carlos Alcaraz did for them, but like, they blessed him with this draw because there's not much on the table for him. Like, Francis Tiafoe being the 29 seed feels kind of weird, but given the results that he's had this year, it actually kind of feels like he's played worse than that seeding. And, it's just been a rough year for Tiafoe. He could use a bounce back. Maybe this is the tournament. Maybe he starts to find it, turn his results around this year.
What a rough first round, though, for Tiafoe with Matteo Arnaldi. That's also not a name. This is a kid that, when he's on, he will knock your socks off. I mean, he has a fire. I love his forehand. It is an absolute weapon that he's so good at utilizing in the right moments, in the right ways. That to me is impressive for someone, that young. And so it's tough for Tiafoe. Do I think this would be harder on a different service for Tiafoe? Yes. I don't know. Something about this tells me that there's a shot for him. And I mean, even if he does get out of that match, you look at the next round and you see a potential Borna Coric, and that doesn't make you feel that great either. And then you look even further to your third round, and you have the defending champion, or one of 2 guys that we spoke about earlier, who have been pretty hot over the last week or two, in Alexander Vukic and Sebastian Offner.
Absolutely. And even just looking at the rest of the seeds in this kind of mini section of the draw, like Ugo Humbert, sure, he's actually a very accomplished grass player, won the Hala title. He's a great player. I could actually see him making a deep run, but I also he particularly, plays extremely well against top 10 players. Like, he has a great record. He shows up for big matches. He can really hang with the top level guys, but I just think Alcaraz is just a cut above. Like, I think that'll just be a little bit too much over the course of best of 5. Like, I think it'll give the time for Alcaraz to really navigate through the dips of his like concentration and his play in a 5-set match. Like, I just don't see many players challenging him there. Tommy Paul is a really interesting name here because we've seen, of course, he's in that Casper Ruud section as well. So honestly, I would say Tommy Paul is the favorite to come out of that little 16th. But Tommy Paul is a guy who I've seen Alcaraz really struggle to play, right? And those have been very good matches in a one-off sense. We've never seen it best of 5, so we don't know how well it'll translate. We've also never seen it on grass, but that's certainly a matchup issue. Tommy's played really well. Obviously wins the title in Queens. I just think the surface, his upside might be highest on this surface, given what the totality of things he can do, right? His ability to come forward, he's now really attacking the net, and he's doing it effectively and often, which are the 2 things that you really want when you're trying to suit your game to the grass courts. And then just his ability, his hand skills, like his ability to block returns, the slice, the backhand down the line that really cuts through the court because he hits it so flat. And then, like, if he has a good forehand day and a good serving day, like, that can be real trouble. Like, I personally, Tommy Paul's my bet to make it the farthest out of the Americans. It could be Taylor Fritz. I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case after seeing what he did in Eastbourne and just his ability to hold seed and how consistent he is. But yeah, I still think Alcaraz should come through this section pretty comfortably.
There's a few names that I see here that I'm just not a fan of. If I'm Carlos Alcaraz, as just a general, some sneaky names that'll come out of, these guys that have the ability to come out of nowhere. I'm looking Botic van de Zandschulp. I'm looking at Brandon Nakashima. Both have made it to the 4th round here. have had pretty good runs given the fact that if you think about where their rankings were at the time, pretty good. And a big one for me is the guy that Taylor Fritz beat in that final, and that's Max Purcell, who, to me, one of the more underrated players in this draw. I don't think until today, was that last week when Fritz beat Purcell and Purcell made it to that final. I think people understood how good he also was at singles, because you think about Max Purcell, a lot of people are going to think about a doubles player. And I think this translates really well to singles, but specifically to this surface. It's something that we've always talked about, even with the composition of the grass changing over time. It will always and forever serve well to a serve and volley game. And if you have good volleys, then that weakness, that kryptonite is now busted. And Max Purcell's volleys are beautiful, and they're very effective, and they work great on this surface. He's a sneaky one that I don't think people would have paid much attention to prior to Eastbourne, but now they certainly will, and rightfully so. This is somebody that could do some damage. The tough thing for him is the fact that you now put him in a situation where his fourth round match is Carlos Alcaraz.
I mean, yeah,
Or
agreed on all counts.
potentially Carlos Alcaraz.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to include that caveat there. Agreed on all counts. I mean, a couple of other names, interesting, sneaky names. Alexander Bublik, obviously, we know what he's capable of if the focus is there, if the concentration is there.
I'll throw RBA out there.
Absolutely. Sneaky veteran. But Bublik's got an interesting first round match against Jakub Menšik. Like, that could be a sneaky fun match. Menšik's still not the most experienced on a grass court, but you can't really deny his firepower off both wings. And if Bublik's not all there mentally, he could be on upset alert first round. I could see Alexander Bublik losing first round, but I could also see him getting to the quarters and beating Carlos Alcaraz. So it
you
just
never know. I mean, Bublik to me fits into this Nick Kyrgios, Gael Monfils kind of category of the very entertaining guys. But when you've got an off day, they're bowing out in God knows what round. But when they're on, they're making a deep run.
It's unplayable.
They are very much so the textbook definition of a wild card. You don't know what you're going to get with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Last name in this kind of half of the draw, Casper Ruud. It's grass.
He's not
really going to be a factor.
When it comes to grass, he should just stick to the golf greens. So,
yeah, I honestly, I think holding seed would be a big win.
Yes.
Right. I think
this is not to discredit the player that is Casper Ruud. It is just a matter of this has not been his surface. His surface was 3 weeks ago, and
he's also made it perfectly clear that he doesn't want it to be his surface either. 2 years ago, he said, it was that quote that is me personally, I think grass is only for golf players. Cool. Fair enough. If you don't want to take 3 weeks out of the calendar, I kind of get it, to be honest. He's kind of always going to build his season around Roland Garros and the clay season. And then, whatever happens on the hard courts happens. And then grass is just kind of forgotten for him. And, he's actually kind of got a favorable draw here. I think he could actually win a couple of rounds, but we'll see. Obviously, a guy like Lorenzo Sonego's lurking, Mariano Navone, Bublik. So interesting guys, but honestly, I kind of think Tommy Paul is the favorite in that section.
Yeah. But a guy that definitely does mind, playing on the grass, it's Andrey Rublev and the boy. So let's talk about it. I don't know. I think he comes out of nowhere. I mean, I love his forehand on this surface. His forehand will be monstrous on whatever surface you put it on. He's so good, in my opinion, in adapting his game to a different surface. You can't lock him down as just being a one, surface specialist. So my constant question with Rublev is what is the barrier that is standing in his way? And I feel like oftentimes it might be the mental.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. Some of it is just the game, right? Like there are certain limitations to
It's
what he
sports.
can do. Can he really do true damage to the favorites of the tournament when all he has? Not to diminish what Andrey Rublev is as a tennis player. Like he is very, very good. He's the 6th seed for a reason, right? But it almost feels like on grass, it's a bit too simplistic. As there's not enough layers to really disrupt what other players can do on the surface, right? Like how often, like, yes, a good first serve and a good forehand can get you very, very far in every tournament you play in, and especially Rublev's because it's world class. But we saw it in the Djokovic quarterfinal last year. I actually thought Rublev played a really good match in that quarter, and it was still Djokovic in 4, right? And so, it's interesting. Rublev to me is always going to be very consistent. He's going to beat the players that he's better than. I don't think he's almost the gatekeeper of the elite of the elites, where it's like, if you are this good and you are better than Andrey Rublev, then yeah, you're a top 8 player, you're elite of the elite, and you can really contend for deep second week runs at slams.
To go off of what you just said, I was going to say his career since 2022 does feel very Agarodwanska-ish to me. It is a very gatekeeper. It is a very, I mean, the thing is, since 2022, in slams, he's made three times he went all the way to the third round and ended there. Once at the Australian, twice at Roland Garros, and every other time that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times quarterfinal, and that's where it ends. But you look at the semifinalists and the finalists, and then you get it. And it does go back to that kind of gatekeeper conversation of this guy is so consistent. But unfortunately for him, there are players that are better than him and that are going to take the extra step. And it is when you take that step farther than him that like, oh, you're legit. And in that same right, as someone who Agarodwanska is the reason why I got into this sport, it feels very reminiscent of an Agarodwanska career.
Yeah, it's very fair. It is tough. I just don't know what the ceiling is for Rublev at this specific tournament. I kind of know what his ceiling is outside of this one tournament in a bubble, but I just feel like he's just going to live up to his seed, make the quarters, probably lose to someone. Of course, it's interesting because his draw is a little bit tricky. Lorenzo Mussetti's really improved on grass. It's really, really made strides, especially off the backhand, isn't struggling so much when people are taking time away from him on this surface, doing a lot more, able to absorb pace a lot better. And then Sebastian Corda, big chance for him, right? He's said, grass is a preferred surface for him. He's very, very competent on the surface. He knows how to move there. His aggression, just the weapons that he has, if he's serving well, he can take out anybody. But we've kind of known this about Sebi Korda for a while, that he has the game and it's just about executing against the best players. He's got a tough first round against Davidovich Fokina. I kind of expect Korda to get through, but I wouldn't be shocked if Davidovich Fokina just has one of those days.
To me, Rublev's main threats, there are 2 names that come to mind to me as his main threats in this quarter, and that is Jack Draper and Taylor Fritz. To me, those are the guys that are going to pose an issue to him. They know how to redirect his pace on this surface. They know how to play to this surface. This surface is real kind to a 1-2 punch. If you can do a nice like serve forehand combo 1-2 punch, you can do pretty well here as long as you make it effective. And that's why Rublev has seen success here.
Yeah,
but these 2
absolutely.
guys are going to be big problems for him if he has to see them.
Absolutely. And you don't want to discount Zverev, but he hasn't proved it on grass.
It's grass. If you're telling me that I'm expecting like deep runs from Sasha Zverev, I'm not. The last slam I'm going to expect you to say it for is Wimbledon.
Yeah,
it's not a discredit to him. It's just not his surface.
It's the one surface where he hasn't had a deep second week run at a slam, right? And for Zverev, like I'm just not sold. He doesn't love moving on grass. He's not very comfortable like with the side to sides. He's not comfortable being the aggressor in points. He would much rather hang back, hit the ball at shoulder height, and just outgrind his opponents.
This is the
Yeah,
only this is the only slam he has not made it past the fourth round in.
Yeah. And and you can kind of see why, right? Because he does love that high contact point. He loves when the ball is heavy and he can just ping backhands cross and down the line and just really rip through them and then just kind of stay with his opponents. Whereas now he's got to be a bit more aggressive. He's got to take points into his own hand. He's got to take charge and really, control the flow of the match. And he's not as comfortable doing that. And he's also just not as comfortable moving as a lot of people. So he's more susceptible to upsets on this surface. Jack Draper's the name everyone's excited about. I
also want to throw Cam Norrie out there. I glanced over him. I think that's another name that could be dangerous on the grass. Yeah. But
former semifinalist at Wimbledon.
But I think all eyes go to Jack Draper and Taylor Fritz in this quarter of the draw. Those are I feel like that might be your fourth round.
Yeah, I
no,
think
sorry, that's right. They'd be a fourth round, I think.
Yeah, they'd be a fourth round.
No, they'd be a third.
Winner.
They'd be a third.
Is it a third? Interesting.
No, it is a fourth. Sorry, winner plays. Yeah,
Fritz would have Tabilo, right? And
it's
Draper
late for me, man.
Draper would have suit up because we've got another pot.
I know. The fourth round would be the potential Rublev.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Fritz, his serve, his backhand are accentuated on this surface. His return's a lot better. His movement is negated, right? There's honestly, I think this is the surface for Taylor Fritz if he's ever going to make a slam final, which I don't know if you'd even be predicting that regularly, but if he does, it's probably Wimbledon. Maybe it's the US Open, but this just feels like the surface where if his serve clicks for 2 weeks, if he has a good forehand stretch and just the backhand is as solid as it is, and he, is a competent enough volleyer, puts away the points that he needs to, he could make a deep run. I wouldn't be shocked if it's this tournament. But then, of course, you've got Alejandro Tabilo, by far most improved player of the year, in my opinion. And it's interesting because they're in the same section, but Fritz and Tabilo, same players, the only players to win a title on all three surfaces this year.
I think it speaks volumes. To me, Taylor Fritz's performance at Eastbourne, and I think I have to go back to this point that needs to be made. And I don't remember who posted this on Twitter, if it was Gil or Alex Groskin, but given what my Twitter feed is, I'd bet the house that it's one of those two. But one of them had posted that it's been since I think the early 2010s, if not the 2000s, since somebody that won one of the Wimbledon warm-up tournaments actually made a final at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where my doubt comes. And it's not necessarily a superstition thing, as it is I feel like he got it out of his system now, and I'm just like, is he going to be able to do the same thing when we get here? It's Taylor Fritz. So my brain is at two extremes where it's either heck yeah, he will, or heck no, he won't. It's like he's either going to be really hot or not with Taylor Fritz. And I think every American fan will hope for the prior that he will be hot. Yeah. But there is a chance that he will go down in flames. And when you look at the potential fourth round of Jack Draper, that should be scary.
Yeah. 100%. That's a tough one. Draper in this home crowd obviously beats Alcaraz at Queens 2 weeks ago. Just his run, winning Stuttgart, first career title for Draper, now firmly British number one. He
is going to feed off of this crowd.
I agree. There is a level of pressure that comes, especially in the UK, where, we saw it for years with Andy Murray. Of course, there are different levels to this. Murray had to go through a lot more than Draper will ever have to, probably.
Murray was also at the time top three, and so it is heavier pressure in its own way.
And then, of course, you get into the whole Scottish English thing.
which
There was,
we're Americans. We're not here to comment on that.
yes, but there was a real contingent
There is a
of
pressure,
British
though.
tennis fans. There was real like a contingent of British tennis fans who were anti Andy Murray because he was Scottish, right? And however much that matters, there was just pressure on Andy Murray when he came here. I don't think that's the case for Jack Draper. I think it almost is going to free him up a little bit. I think he's going to feed off of that crowd. I think he's really going to embrace being the British number one. And he's also in very good form, right? So like, I don't want to get like too into recency bias, but Draper's kind of always had this level in him. Like, it's not like anybody really was surprised that he had it. He just hasn't been healthy, A. And when he's been healthy, he hasn't been able to show it in the biggest moments. He's showing it now. He could very clearly make a run here. I think it's a favorable section given that the seed that he drew was Zverev, right? Of course, it could be tough when you've got guys like Tsitsipas, Korda, Musetti, Rublev, and Fritz in that kind of section. But, you know, there's a way where he gets through, and maybe he's the quarterfinalist that we're talking about. Maybe he makes a semi. I don't know. But I could see him making second week. And
this of all of, you say all these seeds and they're great players and they're all going to be in their own unique way daunting if they are, you know, if that's who Jack Draper looks across the net to see. But at the end of the day, if there's any environment, if I'm Jack Draper, if there's any environment where I would want to see them, it is this one. This is a
100%.
surface that you can take advantage of and a crowd that you can most definitely take advantage of. We know home crowds in general in sports can be pretty brutal if you're playing against someone from that country. If you're playing against the home favorite, like you see it all the time. If you're playing Serena Williams on Arthur Ashe, it is not going to be very fun for you. You could be an American. I watched her play Katie McNally. I know it was not fun for Katie. So it's that home crowd that you can really feed off of. And if you want to talk about that Serena Williams example, I think she does a great job of feeding off of that crowd energy. And I think Jack Draper has that same potential to feed off of it. With that said, another guy that Lord knows how the crowd's going to treat him is Novak Djokovic. I like to think that they treat him pretty well. He does not have a bad draw. If I am a Novak Djokovic fan, though, I am most definitely scared of that potential quarterfinal of either Hubie Hurkacz or Alex de Minaur. That potential would scare me.
If Novak is fully healthy and he's firing, which we don't know, truthfully, we don't know, right? Like, sure. We don't know what status the knee is on right now. We don't know if he is even, we still don't really know if he's going to play. I would assume he's playing. By all accounts, he's looked very healthy in warm-ups, solid play exhibitions. He is going to compete, I would imagine, and he's going to do Novak Djokovic things. And I think what this draw gives him is also the luxury to kind of ease into his first few rounds. Of course, shout out Jake Fernley, his potential second round opponent, have to with the college tennis ties. But Novak Djokovic is Novak Djokovic, right? If he's fully healthy, this is his court. 5 straight finals over the past year, of course, would have been 6 straight titles. Or would have been 5 straight titles, excuse me, if he had beaten Alcaraz last year. But it just speaks volumes about the level that he can bring on these courts at Wimbledon. And it's like, yes, de Minaur 100%. I honestly was thinking about picking him to go to the semis, and then I saw that he was in Novak section. And then Hubie Hurkacz, again, incredible, can serve anybody off the court. If Djokovic is fully healthy, we kind of saw what that match was like last year, right? Hubie's going to probably take him to a couple of tie breaks, and Novak's just going to find the right level to squeeze out a few points. But who knows? Maybe the Novak that we've seen this year is what Novak is. Like, that's just the level that he has, right? I thought there were encouraging signs at the French. I thought he was really competitive. I thought that fire, that energy was back. He didn't come out flat like he has so far this year. But then the knee injury happened, and it kind of just deflated a little bit. I don't know. I think if Djokovic is fully healthy, he still finds a way to get through these. Hurkacz could be a really tough match. I think that could be interesting. Demonor could also make things interesting. I wouldn't even discount Holger, even though he hasn't had great form. He plays Djokovic pretty tightly.
To me, I think the matchup that I think will be the worst for Novak in his quarter, and this is not biased because I will back this up very clearly, is Hubie Hurkacz. I think that will be his worst nightmare in this quarter. Of the names, not to discredit anybody, they're all great players. I see a very sneaky Alexei Popyrin waiting in the I don't even know the phrase, but just waiting for him in that potential third round. And as a whole, I think those first three matches, like you mentioned, good opportunity for him to ease into this tournament. But at the same time, if you get Popyrin, and if Popyrin does that, if you in these first four matches get guys that can do enough damage to you where that injury and that health is not as sound as it really should be, right? It's the coulda, shoulda, woulda. Then you take a look across the net and you see a pretty in-form Hubie Hurkacz. His grass season has been really good thus far. Between the serve and the ground strokes, if Hurkacz play, this is a statement with a lot of ifs, but I'm making it anyways. If Novak is not at 100% or anywhere over 90% health in that potential quarterfinal match, and he's looking across an informed Hubie Hurkacz that plays the way he has played over the last few weeks, I will genuinely take the upset. If I'm betting, I will bet on the upset. Because Hurkacz's game does not work for an unhealthy Novak. It works for a healthy Novak because Novak is able to push those boundaries. Demonor, to me, is a bit less of a threat because Demonor is more of a grinder. Demonor is a lot more of a grinder. Very physical, great game. Novak knows how to counter that on this surface better than he knows how to counter that big serve, to me.
I agree. Those are all very fair points. I mean, I wouldn't even be shocked if that's considered an upset pending Novak's health, right? Like at that point, if he's like stringing himself along and Hubie Hurkacz is playing the dead corpse of Novak Djokovic in the quarterfinals, like Hubie can serve his way to a win there, right?
This is the guy that took out, granted, this was not prime, but this is a guy that took out Roger Federer.
Well, that was Roger Federer on one knee. Like if he gets Novak Djokovic on one knee, sure. Right? Maybe he can do it again. Maybe next year Rafa will come and play him on one knee and he can just end all of their careers at Wimbledon.
Take a win against all the big three. But I think this is Hubie's surface. This is a surface that is matched very well to his game.
What I will say, there's a way where if Novak is not healthy, right? And again, all of this is pending on Djokovic's health, right? Because we both know that if he's fully healthy and he's fit and his mind is there,
he's doing damage
and he's competitive, right? He's going to get through. But if he's not and there are lingering injury concerns, Demonor and maybe even Holger Rune could kind of turn those matches into wars of attrition, right? And it could be like 15, 20 shot rallies and just try and make it as physical as possible on a grass court, which again is easier on the body than any other surface. But if Demonor can just really, find a way to kind of just grind out a few points and push Djokovic and just make him earn every bit and just try and grind it out for 5 sets, like that's a potential pathway. Cause I think you'd probably back Demonor's fitness right now. Obviously you back Djokovic's tennis. And if Djokovic is healthy, you'd also probably back his fitness, even if he is 36, 37. But, it's tough. I think Holger could be really interesting, but I would say Hubie Hurkacz is the biggest threat to Djokovic in this quarter by far. His form, if he has a good, 5-set run on his forehand against Djokovic, like where he's not threatened every other shot, things could get interesting in that one. I'm curious because we are hitting the 50-minute mark if you want to go to predictions for these quarters and the rest of the tournament as a whole.
I was going to say, to transition us there, I mean, the difficulty in this is that so much is pending on the health of Novak Djokovic. And to say that one man can really change your predictions is so accurate for someone like Novak Djokovic and the career he's
Yeah.
had. I think I will be putting a caveat in my prediction if Novak is not healthy, because that is one thing I don't know, because I am no doctor.
I can
But
confirm that. You definitely are no doctor.
where do you want to
Continue.
go? Semifinal predictions?
Why don't we go ahead and do a quick little quarter by quarter since we've previewed all of them? We can just go ahead and state our winners if you want
Okay,
to do
first
that.
first quarter, Jannik Sinner.
Yeah. Do you have I'm going to go with the upset. I think he's going to play Dimitrov, and I think he's going to win that one. But I think Dimitrov does get the upset over Medvedev.
I can definitely respect that take. I see a pretty good run for Grigor. I think that the draw is tough because you will most likely potentially see Jannik Sinner later on in your draw, and that is not somebody at this current moment this year that you want to see across the net from you. Um I was going to say similarly in Grigor making, being who loses in that quarterfinal to Sinner. It's going to be a second Grand Slam in a row where Sinner ruins his dreams, but I think this is what we've learned about Jannik Sinner this year is that his game, it takes no prisoners. On this second quarter, I take Carlos Alcaraz over. I just want to make sure and double check that I'm looking at what would be correctly a actual matchup. Because I am leaning towards a Carlos Alcaraz defeats Tommy Paul, but I want to make sure that is
Yeah.
accurate.
Yeah. Well, I'm right there with you. I'm pretty sure that match is happening, right? Based on the draw right here. But yeah, I'm going to go Alcaraz over Tommy Paul. Tommy could make that interesting, is all I'll say. But
He could. He could. He has the potential to do so.
Yeah. I just think over 5 sets, Alcaraz will find a way.
Okay. Your third quarter, which I think to me is just
now this is where it gets interesting because everything's a crapshoot here.
Pain. It is a pain. It is genuinely a pain to look at this. I think if you want to go the safe route, I take Andrey Rublev losing in the quarters to either Taylor Fritz or Jack Draper. I will take Taylor Fritz for the Americans, for the limited hope that the Americans can have at Wimbledon.
Yeah, well,
I'll take Taylor Fritz with a first semifinal, with a first career semifinal.
Whoa.
Because that would be against whoever's in the bottom half, so the bottom quarter. Taylor Fritz over Andrey Rublev.
That's a little bold. Like, yeah, Fritz.
I just don't know. I just don't know who else comes out of this quarter. It could be Jack Draper, but I'm doubtful in his consistency in 5-setters across so many matches. Right. To me, if he keeps it short, to me, the real tester, given that he wins his first round match and stands across the net from Cam Norrie, taking down Cam Norrie for me will be a huge confidence booster in my belief in Jack Draper. I need to see that he can perform in a 5 sets with these grinders like Cam Norrie is. Cam Norrie is physical. He's sharp. He will push Draper.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be a great litmus test.
That's fair. Also, a name we didn't throw out in this section, Marcos Giron. Heck of a grass season this year. He's been very, very solid. His game suits the surface. I think he can make a run.
Too bad his second round is the potential Sasha Zverev.
Well, I think he could beat Zverev on this surface.
He could. But I think at the same time, Zverev is good enough on grass where I think it will be very difficult for Giron to do so.
Yeah, that's fair. My quarter. All of this was just a ploy for me to stall for my pick.
I'm aware. This quarter alone is just like, honestly, throw at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah. Westhoff, hopefully you can bleep that out. If not, sorry to listeners. You know what? I'm gonna go bold. I'm gonna say Jack Draper beats Sevi Korda in the quarters.
I don't hate the Sevi Korda pick. It is someone that I also looked at, and I just don't have the confidence If he
Yeah.
gets he gets past Davidovich Fokina, awesome. Is he getting out of even that, 4-match block right there
Yeah.
of the Nishioka Borges, Rusevori, McDonald, Taro Daniel, and Tsitsipas? That is a
Yeah.
very tough four.
I 100% agree. I could honestly see him losing in the first round. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if he loses to Davidovich Fokina.
But at the same time, we're talking about Sebi Korda here, and if he does come out of this 4-match block, then he's on fire. Then there's something going right for him.
I agree. And I also just like the matchup for him against Tsitsipas. Just because, like backhand to backhand, I trust Korda in that rally, right?
Sure.
Like, Tsitsipas is going to target there are no secrets in that match. Tsitsipas is going to target the Korda forehand. Korda is going to target the Tsitsipas backhand. I just think Tsitsipas's backhand return is so vulnerable on this surface that the pathway for what Korda needs to do on serve in that match is just very clear to me. Like, I'm just going to lean Korda in that one, but Tsitsipas could serve and forehand his way to a win there. And then it's like, I trust Rublev. Like, I think he'll find a way to get through Musetti. But I don't know. Like, Lorenzo's playing well. He could make that really interesting. If Rublev has a bad mental day, that could go haywire for him. And then Korda is just that's a match I'd be interested to see. Korda versus Rublev. I kind of hope that one happens now. But yeah, I'm gonna go Korda over Draper.
Let's take this last quarter. Let's take this last quarter. And I mean, you know what I'm saying, and I think I know what you're saying. To me, it is, and you can hear the voice crack in the inconfidence in saying this. To me, this is heavily dependent on Novak's health. Heavily dependent on Novak's health. To me, in general, this is going to be the most boring quarter. I say it is Novak Djokovic versus Hubie Hurkacz. The winner is dependent on Hubie's form plus Novak's health. If Novak is not above 90%, I'm putting it on Hubie. If Novak is at 100, you are not denying the unstoppable force that is Novak Djokovic. Simple as. If Novak is not healthy whatsoever, I will even go as gutsy as to say Hubie over Holger or Kachanov.
Yeah.
Karen Kachanov, another guy that can surprise the daylights out of you.
Yeah. We said this was an easy Novak draw, but there are a couple
of guys. It's not at all.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it is. It's an easy first 3 matches.
Yeah.
For him.
And I think that matters too, because I think that really can help him ease his way into the draw. But it's so tough, maybe Khachanov could beat him just flat out. If he could just out consistent him.
This is the problem, is that Karen Khachanov, if Karen Khachanov has an on day, he's gonna do some stuff that is just gonna ruin everybody's bracket.
Like, I could just imagine like a bunch of backhand to backhand rallies there. But I'm assuming Novak's fit. I think he gets through that round. You know what? I always regret this, but I'm gonna pick the upset. I'm gonna go Hubie over Novak.
Do you understand how close I was to doing that? And it is partially biased because I think this is a surface that me watching Hubie Hurkacz on grass is just an enjoyable experience for me. I really do enjoy watching him play on grass because his game style to the surface matches so well. But I'm just scared of Novak Djokovic. It's Novak Djokovic.
Well, you're scared of him. Everyone else in the draw.
Everybody in the draw is scared of him. Yeah. Everybody, and it's
as they should be. Yeah,
there's nothing you can do. It's just I will not be surprised if Hubie makes his second Wimbledon semi, and I will say whoever makes the semifinal out of that bottom, if we are correct, that is Hubie and Novak. To me, whoever wins that match is the finalist.
I agree.
If Hubie beats Novak, let alone, what I'm saying, a point blank period. If Hubie gets out of this quarter,
he's making the final.
He is making the final.
I agree.
Novak Djokovic is the only thing that stands currently, in my opinion. Okay, I will also say that, Alex de Minaur and a bunch of other people also stand, but talking like main huge roadblocks. Novak Djokovic is what stands in his way between his first career slam final.
Yeah,
And I am knocking on wood because I would like to see that, because I think it'd be really interesting to what it does to him, his confidence, and the rankings. So
yeah. All
this
points
is a
very
great
valid
opportunity
there.
for him. This is a great opportunity for him.
All points very valid there. I'm gonna assume that Novak is at like 80%. And so
Then I'm taking Hubie Hurkacz to the semifinals.
exactly.
I can't believe I'm saying this on a men's draw. I mean, this would be huge. This would be
Yeah.
huge for Hubie. This would be huge for the entire nation. I mean, Poland has only had one single semifinalist in men's singles, and that was Jerzy Janowicz back in 2013.
Yeah.
Oh, that all Polish quarterfinal. What a year that was for Poles at Wimbledon.
That
But
was wild.
it would be very entertaining to see what damage Hubie could do to this draw. For the sake of anybody that enjoys watching fun tennis, I really hope that Hubie plays and really well and continues his form from the last few weeks. I think it would be
Yeah.
enjoyable for people to watch as a whole.
Yeah. Could be fun.
On that note, final remarks before we go
Well,
back
are
to
we-
back and head into our women's.
Well, are we going to do a semifinal and final prediction? Because I have one ready.
Okay. Hubie Hurkacz makes the final, loses to Jannik Sinner.
Oh, that's boring. Now we're going to have the same prediction. We're going to have the same prediction.
It's a replay of God, what final did they play? Was that Rothesay?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was. Well, there it is.
Well, no, it was Hala, but
Oh, it was Hala. That's right. No, Rothesay. I'm thinking Rothesay because that's where
that's Eastbourne.
Kalinskaya played, I think.
Yeah, Kalinskaya. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what Sinner. Yeah, because Sinner mentioned it in his final remarks.
Yeah, not a great move, Jannik, but yeah.
Hope you enjoyed the couch. But I mean, it is quite simple. I think simple on one side where you do have this Jannik versus Alcaraz, which I think is quite clear.
Do you? Because
to me it is no, I'm saying the fact that they will match up against each other in that semifinal. To me, that is clear, given that no injuries or none of that. We know that the grass may cause people to slip. We will hope. As in we will hope that nothing happens. But no, I just think this is the spanner in the works here is Novak Djokovic's health. And it always will be. It's just the one thing that is so hard to ignore. It's just a pain when you want to do predictions.
Yeah.
Because 100% Novak Djokovic is very dangerous, even in that, especially in that final, once he has played himself out through all of those rounds.
Absolutely. And if he's healthy, I'm picking him to the final. May even pick him to win the tournament. We'll see. We'll probably do another episode halfway through Wimbledon at some point. We got to get back on a consistent train here, but we're going to go ahead and record a women's show now. So
yeah, a much more complicated, a much harder, semifinal to pick out. But we'll hope you guys join us for that one as well. But with that said, we're going to go continue our night. Good night, everybody. We'll catch you guys next time.